So let's get to this video for a second, because we mentioned it, but let's just talk about if you listen to Mark Kelly or any of these other people.
Yeah.
And I'll leave Alyssa Slotkin out for now because she's never served in the military, despite her claims that she should tell. Well, actually, let me just start with her because I'll get her out of the way.
Yeah.
You're a JAG. You've graduated from the military, the Naval Academy. You served on ships. Alyssa Slotkin says if you're out in the military and you think that an order is unlawful, you should go see the JAG right away. Is that what someone should do if they have a feeling that an order is illegal?
It's very case dependent. It's very.
So you're on a ship. You're on the USS Gerald Ford. You're off the coast of Venezuela. You're Petty Officer Smith. You're on the deck, and you think an officer is driving the ship in the wrong direction because you don't want to go to Venezuela. You should run down and ask to see the JAG.
Yeah. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to clear that up. I appreciate Alyssa Slotkin giving our military advice after not serving in the military. But anyway, I just wanted to get through that. But let's get back to everyone else who has served. Mark Kelly and others say that all they're doing is actually citing the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and reminding soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and guardsmen that they should they should adhere to the Code of Military Justice and not engage in illegal orders. And what's wrong with that?
So there's a few things wrong with that. First of all, they're misciting what the UCMJ actually says. Your duty is not to just disobey unlawful orders, it's to disobey manifestly unlawful orders. Orders that are obviously unlawful to anybody who hears them. Okay? Not orders that can be open to interpretation. All orders under the UCMJ are presumed to be lawful. Unless it is, so outrageous, deploy to DC with the National Guard. Okay, people argue whether that's lawful or unlawful, but for a soldier to simply disobey that because they happen to agree with the politicians on this side who say it's unlawful, they're getting a court-martial. They deploy, and one of their officers says, "Hey, start shooting these protesters in the head." Okay, that's manifestly unlawful, and so that one you're gonna disobey. So they're confusing the issue by lowering the standard and not telling them about the manifestly piece, and trying to encourage people essentially to disobey orders that they disagree with, that maybe some people think is unlawful. But the reality is, and I mean, it's kind of ironic when you look at this, in connection with like the COVID vax, where a lot of people thought that was unlawful. Turns out it was unlawful. But at the time, the commanders who implemented that were told, hey, this is lawful. It's been signed off by all the general councils. It's been signed off by all the TJAGs. And so they executed it. Turned out later to be unlawful. Now, should those commanders be, court-martialed for obeying an unlawful order? No, because it wasn't manifestly unlawful to them at the time. Same thing here. That seaman who thinks we shouldn't be driving towards Venezuela, okay, that's not manifestly unlawful. People can debate it. Therefore, you have to follow it. The UCMJ says it's presumed to be lawful. You follow it. So they're misstating what the law is. But also then, why are they, yes, okay, I get the idea of a public service announcement to remind people of certain provisions of the law. Why are they choosing that provision? They're choosing that provision because they're trying to play it with all of the other political rhetoric. Even though that video doesn't define what is an unlawful order, taken in conjunction with the other rhetoric of, these deployments are unlawful, the Venezuelan boat strikes are unlawful. They're trying to, to do something there. I mean, if you just had a public service, if they picked a different section of the UCMJ and instead put out a video, we'd like to speak to all service members and remind you that sexual assault is unlawful and you have a duty not to sexually assault people, nobody would be having a problem with that, okay? Because that's very clear. But here they chose something and they put it in a context that was intended to sow confusion.
Right. So Mark Kelly and all these people are members of Congress.
Yeah.
They're not on active duty. And some of them claim I not only did I just remind people of the UCMJ, but I'm also a member of Congress. So I have the speech and debate clause, and I have every right to say whatever I want, and I'm protected by the Constitution.
it is one of those things that people have to remember. Members of Congress are given a blank pass that they're allowed to lie to you. Now, when you remember that, then take everything that they say, just with that lens. But at the same time, the speech and debate clause is not as broad as everybody wants it to be at times. Yes, it does immunize them from a lot of civil suits for defamation. But when you're talking about like actual seditious speech, not on the floor, not as part of a legitimate legislative function, because that the speech and debate clause is limited to legitimate legislative functions. If you're putting out a separate video where you're encouraging military members to disobey orders and to decrease the morale, I do not believe that, and this has not really been tested yet, but I don't think that the speech and debate clause is going to immunize them from that if they were to be charged under Title 18. And if they were charged, if Mark Kelly gets charged in the UCMJ, there's zero case law on how speech and debate applies in a military courtroom.
All right, guys, if you need a great night's sleep, do what I do every single night. Use Beam's Dream Powder. Right now, the ultimate cyber discount is available to my listeners, only 50% off, the best deal going that you are going to thank me for, because you're going to sleep better. You're going to stay asleep, wake up feeling refreshed. Go to shopbeam.com/Spicer. Use code Spicer for 50% off for a very, very limited time during their cyber sale. Shopbeam.com/Spicer, code word Spicer, 50% off. So you've got two sort of legal issues happening. One, apparently they've been interviewed by the FBI.
Yes.
That would seem to be the civilian side. And then
Correct.
You've got potentially Mark Kelly, and I want you just to explain this quickly, like potentially being recalled to active duty to address this under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Can you explain both scenarios?
Sure. So he's the only one that's retired. So he's the only one that, because he carries an ID card and he continues to cash a paycheck from the department, he's still subject to the UCMJ. All of the others got out, before retirement, and so none of the others are subject to UCMJ. They can only be charged in the civilian system. He technically has, both that he could be facing. Now, the practicalities of a retired military member being recalled to active duty for something that they've done in retirement, it has been done. It has absolutely been done in the past. It's infrequent, it's unusual, but the law allows it.
Okay, and then what about the others, the Jason Crow, Chris DeLuzio, who have all served, Maggie Goodlander from New Hampshire, but are not retired and have said that the FBI has interviewed them?
So they could be subject potentially to charges by the U.S. Attorney's Office.
For what?
They could be charged with, I forget the exact sections, Title 18, about these seditious acts where you're trying to specifically undermine the morale and good order and discipline in the military by asking people to be disobedient. There is a very specific section on that. And so they could absolutely be charged, by the U.S. Attorney on that. That's because it happened in D.C. That'd be something that falls under Jeanine Pirro's jurisdiction.
Speaking of Jeanine Pirro's, the last question I want to ask you, as a non-lawyer,
Good.
I thought that when the president deployed the National Guard, there were two things that were really bulletproof. And I say this as a guy who only watches Law and Order. One, in D.C., the president, as far as I can tell, constitutionally has the right to control the National Guard. It's a federal district. That, to me, was a no-brainer. On these other cities, I thought the administration was very smart because they were saying the National Guard is being used to protect federal assets, federal agents, 1811, which is law enforcement, or federal buildings. And I thought, that was really smart of them. They really were narrow in their focus. And yet the courts are saying, or at least questioning this. Why? What am I missing?
Honestly, it's politics. I mean, it's one of those things where, the law says that he's allowed to do it. And so for example, what happened in California where he called in the National Guard, the law says that he's allowed to do it. And one of the standards is when the local law enforcement is unwilling or unable to do what they need to do. And so there, in that case, initially there was the order that it was unlawful. It went up to the Ninth Circuit. It got knocked back down, and then they held the trial where the trial judge, a district court judge, had a trial on the issue of whether the LAPD was sufficiently responding, to the protests and everything. And that judge made a decision that, no, the LAPD is fine. And so, of course, that goes up on appeal and everything else. It becomes a very fact-specific inquiry. I mean, much like, these boat strikes, you have to look at it from a two-level, analysis. You start with what is the law, and that generally there isn't going to be that much disagreement on. The next level is the facts of, do the facts of what's happening in Venezuela, in LA, in Chicago, do those facts meet this legal standard? And I think that's where most of the dispute comes in.
Absolutely. Tim, I can't thank you enough for your time today, because this discussion, an explanation of what's going on, I don't think anyone's going to see anywhere else. So if you're wondering, if you're watching the New York Times or the Washington Post going, I don't get this, you've just broken it down in a way that I don't think anybody else has or will. So thank you for your time today to break this down for us and give us some insight.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.